My boss smiled and said, "You're too valuable to promote." I should have taken that as a compliment. Instead, I watched her take credit for my work, sabotage my team, and paint me as difficult. So I let her think she'd won, until I burned her whole kingdom down, from the inside. If you've ever been passed over, silenced, or underestimated, then buckle in. This one's for you. Smash that like button, subscribe for more real revenge stories, and tell me in the comments, have you ever taken back your power? Now, let me tell you how I took mine.
I'm Danny, 35, single, cat mom, and unapologetically creative. I live in New York City, which sounds glamorous until you realize half your rent goes toward a shoebox apartment and the other half to over-caffeinating yourself enough to survive agency deadlines. I've been in the creative industry for over a decade now. I didn't go to some fancy Ivy League school. I went to a public college where I built my portfolio by designing posters for campus plays and indie band flyers. I worked 3 jobs out of school to afford my first MacBook. I clawed my way into the industry through cold emails, internships no one wanted, and taking on the client projects that weren't sexy enough for the senior team. And somehow, against all odds, I made it. Not just to a good job, but to the job, art director at one of the most respected boutique agencies in Manhattan, the place that handled luxury brands, Fortune 500s, and edgy startups alike. It should have been the dream. But dreams can rot from the inside when you're not allowed to grow. For 6 years, I was the creative brain behind every major campaign at our agency. The strategist, the designer, the pitch queen. I brought in more clients than I could count, crafted brand stories from scratch, and carried the weight of our portfolio on my back. But there was always a ceiling, and her name was Meredith. Meredith wasn't just my boss, she was the boss. The agency's golden girl, always 10 minutes late and never called out for it. Harvard MBA, blew kisses to the CEO on company calls, and drank rosé with investors after hours. She knew how to speak fluent executive. Big words, no meaning, tons of polish. She was the queen of saying nothing with absolute authority. And I'll admit it, when I first joined, I admired her. She carried herself with confidence, knew how to work a room, and wore heels I couldn't even imagine standing in for more than 5 minutes. I thought, maybe she'll be the one to lift other women up. But over time, I realized she wasn't paving the way for women like me. She was standing at the gates, clipboard in hand, deciding who got to pass through. And spoiler alert, I was not on her guest list. When I asked about growth, she gave me the same line every time. "Danny, you're so good at what you do, we honestly couldn't survive without you in that role." At first, I felt flattered, essential, like a backbone. But slowly, that compliment started to feel more like a shackle. Because while I stayed put, every intern I trained, every wide-eyed 22-year-old fresh out of design school got promoted within a year. I'd build campaigns from the ground up, and Meredith would be the one presenting them to clients and getting her name printed in Ad Age. Every success I handed her, she wore like a crown, while I was left behind, invisible in my own empire. The moment I saw that LinkedIn post, it felt like a piece of me short-circuited. I stared at the screen, rereading the caption 3 times, like maybe I'd misinterpreted it. So proud of our team for winning gold for our latest brand launch. Vision, strategy, and execution, all done in-house. And below that, a carousel of slides that I knew intimately because I'd spent 3 straight weekends perfecting them. No edits, no tweaks, not even a new font. Just mine, rebranded under her name like I was a ghost she'd harvested from the shadows. I didn't even feel anger, not right away. That came later. At first, it was more like watching yourself get erased in real time, like the sum of your creativity, effort, and identity being photoshopped out of existence. When I confronted her the next morning, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I asked, politely, calmly, almost too calmly, because part of me still wanted to believe maybe it was an oversight, a mistake. But when she leaned back, arms crossed, and told me, if you're really team-focused, credit shouldn't matter, something inside me cracked. Not just because of what she said, but how easily she said it. Like she'd rehearsed that line 100 times. Like I wasn't even the first. After that, the shift was subtle, but constant. I'd check the team calendar and find meetings I was never invited to. Weekly one-on-ones, the kind we used to treat like strategy huddles, got postponed indefinitely. Design reviews, where I was once the final filter, were suddenly being routed directly to her, as if I'd become optional. At first, I second-guessed myself, told myself maybe I'd slipped, maybe I'd been too sensitive, maybe I wasn't being assertive enough. That's how corporate manipulation works. It teaches you to gaslight yourself before anyone else gets the chance. But then came the whispers. Not to my face, of course. That's not how this game is played. An intern accidentally let it slip during a coffee break. Meredith said you've been stressed. She told us not to overwhelm you. Ah, there it was, the narrative. Donnie, the overworked creative. Donnie, the emotional time bomb. Donnie, the burnout. Suddenly, I was being cast in a story I didn't audition for. What stung the most wasn't just that she was taking my credit, it was that she was reshaping how others saw me. And she knew exactly how to do it. She didn't need to fire me. She just needed to discredit me. Let me slowly fade into irrelevance while she used my work to climb higher. She'd keep me close enough to benefit from my skills, but distant enough that I'd never outshine her. I'd become her secret weapon, sharp, silent, and unthanked. And it worked, for a while. My inbox started to dry up. Fewer CCs, fewer creative briefs. People who used to swing by my desk with ideas now nervously tiptoed past like I was contagious. Even the agency's mood board, my pride and joy, was suddenly being updated by a junior associate who once asked me how to open Illustrator. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts, and I started to bleed doubt. There were nights I sat in my apartment, staring at the wall with my laptop still open, wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. Wondering if maybe I really was slipping. Maybe I had lost my edge. But every time that thought crept in, I'd open my folders. I'd scroll through every campaign deck, every strategy doc, every wireframe with my fingerprints on them. And I'd remind myself, no one let me be good. I made myself good. And if Meredith thought she could write me out of the story, she clearly forgot one thing. I still held the pen. She wanted a silent workhorse, someone to build the empire while she wore the crown. But what she didn't realize was that I wasn't just building campaigns. I was quietly building proof, a trail, a record. Every file, every timestamp, every Slack message was a breadcrumb. I didn't know exactly what I'd do with it yet, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't incompetence. It was strategy. And two can play that game. If she wanted me to disappear, I'd give her exactly that, but not as a casualty, as a shadow, a reminder, the kind that lingers in every corner and whispers, "You can't do this without me." My new mission wasn't just to survive, it was to make myself indispensable while making her look unstable. It started small, death by neglect, but aimed in the other direction. When Meredith passed me an unfinished pitch deck 5 minutes before a client presentation, I didn't pull the all-nighter to fix it like I used to. I closed my laptop, made myself tea, and watched Succession. The next morning, when she stumbled through her pitch using bullet points that still said, "Insert examples here," I just nodded politely from across the table. Let the silence hang. In creative brainstorms, I stopped saving her half-baked ideas. When she'd suggest something like, "What if the brand feels like empowered softness?" which meant absolutely nothing, I just jotted down without offering the polished metaphor I usually pulled from thin air. She was so used to me filling the gaps, she didn't realize how wide they were until clients started noticing. And they did notice. Questions began trickling in after meetings. Who led the concept for this? Was there a different designer on last quarter's version? Is Danny still involved? That last one, music to my ears. At the same time, I was planting seeds everywhere else, especially with the interns, because while Meredith was busy gatekeeping, I was building an army. I took them out for coffee, reviewed their portfolios, gave them tips I wished someone had given me at 22. Not just design tricks, but how to navigate agency politics, how to read a room, when to speak up, and more importantly, when to document everything. It was quiet, careful mentorship, off the calendar, out of her sight, but it was working. Leela, bright, curious, and full of potential, told me one afternoon, almost apologetically, "I didn't realize how much you were doing behind the scenes. Meredith made it sound like you were checked out." I just smiled. In truth, I wasn't checked out. I was tuning in, watching, listening, letting Meredith build her own illusion of control while I quietly pulled thread after thread. And she made it easy. Her ego didn't allow her to double-check details. She was convinced her charm could cover any cracks, and for a long time it had. But charm doesn't deliver results, and as I backed away from her messes, the foundation began to buckle. The intern presentations I used to ghostwrite for her, suddenly they were full of basic design errors and incoherent messaging. She brushed it off as giving them room to fail, but leadership started noticing the inconsistency. When she missed a major deadline for a holiday campaign, one I'd flagged weeks earlier, she threw the intern team under the bus in a Monday meeting. That was her first real mistake. You don't throw people under the bus after someone's been feeding them. One of the interns, a quiet guy named Marcus, stepped in to defend himself. He didn't throw her under, not directly. He just calmly stated that he'd submitted the assets to Meredith 3 days before the deadline and included the original email timestamp. I watched as the creative director's eyebrows lifted. It was subtle, a shift in the room's air, but it was the first time I saw the spell crack. The interns started coming to me more often, not just for design help, but for validation. They saw the pattern now, the manipulation, the favoritism, and once people see, they don't unsee. Even some of the mid-level staff started showing up at my desk with quiet questions. "Hey, do you know what's going on with Meredith and the client list? Was that deck really her idea?" I didn't gossip. I didn't speculate. I just answered with facts, dates, file names. I let them connect the dots. But behind closed doors, I was doing more. I started archiving. Every deck I touched, I saved a version with my initials. I documented edits, tracked Slack messages, organized folders with creation metadata. Not to weaponize, not yet, but to prepare. Because if Meredith wanted to play chess, I'd already memorized the board. And in the rare moment she did ask for my input, which only happened when she was cornered, I gave her just enough strategy to almost win the client back, just enough visuals to impress without dazzling. She started needing me again, but she didn't know why. That's the thing about invisible labor. It's only invisible to the people who don't understand it. And Meredith had never really understood it. She just benefited from it. Now, I was letting her walk into the meetings unprepared, not completely, but enough to feel the discomfort. Enough to make her ask herself, why isn't this going smoothly anymore? The truth? I wasn't sabotaging her. I was just letting her operate at her own level. And once I stopped carrying her weight, it became painfully clear how little she was lifting. The team noticed, the clients noticed, even upper management started to notice. And Meredith? Oh, Meredith, she started noticing me again. But this time, not as a loyal lieutenant. She started seeing me as a threat. She tried to pull me back in. A coffee meeting here, a last-minute invite to a strategy call there. I went, smiled, played the part, let her think she was reeling me back in. But the truth? I wasn't her subordinate anymore. I was the storm she couldn't predict, and I was just getting started. It's a strange thing. The moment you realize the system that held you back is also the one vulnerable to collapse if just the right pressure is applied. And I wasn't swinging wildly anymore. I'd spent months studying every crack in Meredith's glass pedestal. Now I had a file, a very well-organized, color-coded, time-stamped file. Inside it were emails clearly showing the chain of authorship, campaign drafts sent from my inbox days before she posted them publicly with her name, Slack messages where I outlined initial creative directions, screenshots of Google Drive metadata that linked my name to every core deliverable, and testimonies, careful, anonymous ones, from interns and junior staff who had watched Meredith claim work that wasn't hers, over and over again. But the real pièce de résistance was the side-by-side. Her viral LinkedIn carousel versus my original pitch deck, matched slide for slide, font for font. Even the image file names were identical. It wasn't just theft, it was lazy theft, the kind of sloppy cover-up only arrogance creates. And that's when I knew. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to march into HR with a file and tears and accusations. Meredith had always thrived by avoiding noise, so I gave them none. Just silence and receipts. I opened a new email account with a random name, routed through a VPN, and wrote a short, tight note to HR. Subject: Serious ethical breach. Anonymous tip. Please see the attached documentation regarding ongoing credit misattribution, copyright infringement, and the fostering of a hostile work environment through manipulation and exclusion. This pattern has affected multiple employees over the last 2 years. All supporting evidence is enclosed. Please handle with discretion. More than one career depends on your integrity. I attached everything. No editorializing, no emotions, just facts. Then I clicked send and closed the tab. No fireworks, no immediate reply, just a quiet, eerie sense of power humming beneath my skin. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even smile, because I knew better than to expect the corporate machine to turn quickly. HR wasn't in the business of defending underdogs. They were in the business of liability management. But I also knew that what I'd sent them was unignorable. So I went back to work like nothing had happened. I continued forgetting to cover for Meredith's oversights. I let her stand in front of clients without the guardrails I used to build behind the scenes. And the cracks widened. I remember one meeting in particular, a big pitch to a legacy fashion brand, the kind of client we needed. Meredith strutted in with her usual air of confidence, but within minutes it was clear she hadn't read the brief. She referenced the wrong campaign slogan, pitched a concept we'd already ruled out, and mispronounced the CEO's name. The client's face, stone cold. I sat across from her, taking notes, silent, neutral, watching the train derail slowly, beautifully. Later that week, the client pulled the plug. Quietly, no drama, just a short email thanking us for our time. Meredith blamed the team, told the partners we'd let her down. But I didn't defend myself. I didn't correct the record. I knew HR was watching now. And while they worked through their process, which involved combing through data, checking timestamps, and conducting very quiet interviews, I started planning my escape. I knew there was no future for me at that agency. Even if Meredith got what she deserved, I couldn't stay. The rot had seeped too far in. The people at the top had let her operate unchecked for years, which meant even if they cut her out, the culture that bred her would linger. So I updated my portfolio. I reached out to former clients. I set up coffee chats that weren't about catching up, but quietly saying, "Hey, I'm available again." And they listened. Because it turns out, when you stop making yourself small for someone else's benefit, people start to notice your actual size. At the agency, the atmosphere started to shift, slowly at first, a question here, a side eye there. Meredith started to panic. I could see it in how often she tried to loop me back in. Sudden compliments, let's grab a drink sometime, invitations to brainstorm sessions she'd ignored me in for months. But I'd already detached. The only thing I gave her now was the bare minimum, and when she faltered, I let her fall. One Friday afternoon, I saw her standing outside the HR director's office, arms crossed, face tight with controlled rage. She didn't look at me when I walked by, but I saw her jaw clench. She knew. Not who, not yet, but someone had lit the fuse, and the fire was getting closer. Still, I kept my head down, let her sweat, let her spin. I continued my work, mentored the team, and waited. And one day, I saw the internal calendar update. All team meeting, 3 p.m., mandatory. Now, if you've ever worked in corporate, you know the word mandatory is code for something is going down. I didn't know what exactly yet, but my gut told me the dominoes were finally tipping. Still, I didn't allow myself hope, not until it happened, not until the moment after the final match dropped. Because revenge isn't about ego. It's not about yelling, "I told you so," in a boardroom. It's about crafting something so meticulous, so undeniable, that the truth becomes inescapable, not because you screamed it, but because it echoed so loudly no one could ignore it anymore. And I knew that echo was coming, soon, any day now. So I waited. Calm, steady, quiet, just like the eye of the storm. When Meredith walked out of that meeting, lips pressed, face flushed, ponytail slightly undone, I knew something had cracked beyond repair. She didn't say anything. No speech, no last-ditch attempt to spin the narrative, no passive-aggressive Slack post thanking everyone for the opportunity. She just vanished. Her office stayed dark, her desk untouched. One of the interns said they saw her badge get deactivated on the access board outside the elevator. No HR memo, no farewell email, just sudden absence, the kind that screams guilt louder than any confession ever could. And in her place, silence. It wasn't the awkward kind. It was the quiet that follows the fall of a dictator, a hush thick with relief, tension unwinding in people's shoulders, in the way they dared to laugh again in the break room. People started using my name in meetings again, out loud, without a glance over their shoulder. Clients started asking if I'd be back on their accounts. And the interns? They began walking a little taller, like the shadow that had loomed over their growth had finally lifted. Then Leela made her post. It was simple. A photo from our whiteboard sessions, the ones where I'd coached her through her first campaign proposal. The caption read, "When I started this job, I thought I was just here to learn the ropes. I never imagined I'd meet a mentor who would reshape how I see myself, not just as a designer, but as a leader." She never asked for recognition. She just showed up every day and poured into people like me. I hope one day I can do for someone else what she did for me. She didn't tag me. She didn't have to. The comments filled with messages from people across the industry, other interns, former clients, even a few execs from other agencies. They knew. They remembered who had really been behind those winning campaigns, who had led by example when the spotlight was elsewhere. Within 24 hours, her post had over 20,000 likes. And for the first time in years, I felt seen, not for the performative leadership Meredith had clung to, but for the real work, the invisible labor, the mentorship, the ideas that had survived her attempts to bury them. The following Monday, HR called me in. The director smiled with that too careful corporate grin and said, "We'd like to offer you the creative director position, effective immediately." And for a moment, I just sat there, calm, composed, while the weight of it settled. I thought about every time I stayed late to fix her decks, every weekend I spent reworking brand strategy while she played socialite, every intern she warned not to get too close to Danny, and how none of that had been enough to break me. So I looked her in the eye and said, "I appreciate it, but I've already accepted another offer." Her expression barely faltered. She nodded, probably expecting some counteroffer dance, but I stood, thanked her for her time, and walked out of that office for the last time. I didn't take the corner office. I didn't want the desk that came with her shadow. I didn't want the power in a place that only recognized it once it was threatened. Instead, I walked out with something better, my portfolio, my dignity, and the respect of every single person she tried to keep beneath her heel. The agency lost their ghost, and the interns, they became my legacy, not through title or hierarchy, but through every bit of knowledge I passed down, every door I helped crack open, every ounce of trust I worked to rebuild. I joined a smaller agency, one that was values-driven, collaborative, and transparent. They didn't care about where I went to school or who I knew. They cared about ideas, impact, and authenticity. And it was there that I finally felt what I had been denied for so long: the freedom to lead without apology, without pretending to be less than I am to make someone else feel more secure. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. It doesn't always come in dramatic confrontations or viral exposés. Sometimes it's quiet, surgical, precise. It's watching someone try to erase you, only to realize they were drawing their own exit plan in permanent ink. And when it's done right, it doesn't just free you, it sets others free too. Meredith thought she owned me because I didn't chase credit, but there's a difference between being humble and being used. I wasn't too valuable to promote, I was too smart to control, and that scared her. Now, I mentor women in creative fields and teach them the one lesson she accidentally gave me: if they won't promote you, promote yourself.
So what do you think? Was that justice served or served cold? If you've ever had a boss steal your shine, tell me in the comments. Like this video if you've ever had to fight for your own damn credit. And subscribe for more stories where underdogs become legends. Until next time, stay bold, stay smart, and never let anyone dim your brilliance.